Welcome to Tarantula's Dream TV. You are watching a previously recorded broadcast. Tune in every Monday and Wednesday from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Instagram at TarantulasDreamTV for new episodes. And remember, it is a weird, weird world.
30 years ago today, right at this hour, our 5 p.m. newscast aired a live interview with a man we call Dennis. His true identity wouldn't be revealed for another 7.5 months.
But the allegations made by Dennis in that 5-minute segment caught the attention of the entire world. The public came to know about a top secret place known as Area 51. The I-Team's George Knapp was part of that conversation. The person who was interviewed was actually named Bob Lazar. George?
May 15th, 1989, seems like only yesterday. Not really. I was the co-anchor of the 5 o'clock news with Paula Francis, and our newscast back then featured a nightly interview segment. The guest we had scheduled for that day bailed on us at the last minute, so I placed a call to famed aviator John Lear because he'd been telling me he knew someone who'd been hired to work at an ultra-secret military base near Groom Lake. We had no idea the interview would still be of interest 30 years later.
It is intended for the entertainment and instruction of broad-minded adults only, and should not be played to or sold to minors under any circumstances whatsoever. Thank you.
Broadcasting from the floating pie pan in the sky at Groom Lake Analog Recordings. Welcome to Tarantula's Dream TV. Now here's your host, Samba.
Hello everybody, welcome to another broadcast of Tarantula's Dream TV. I am your host,
Samba.
And we're off to the races tonight. Welcome back to the show, everybody. I took a week off. I took a little well-earned vacation to Aruba. I went to the old Gorgonzola Hotel and really spent all my money over in Aruba at the old Gorgonzola. I do a little trip to the Gorgonzola every year, and just because there's a global pandemic going on doesn't mean I'm going to miss my chance to go to the biggest resort in Aruba. So I'm back, I'm ready, I'm relaxed, I'm refreshed, and I'm ready to get into Bob Lazar this week. So if that's why you're here, you're in luck. Phone number for the show is 520-704-7820. If you'd like to call in at 9:30, opening up the phone lines, open lines, so please hold your calls to 9:30. But I am ready to talk to people, so please, if you have anything you want to say, if you want to ask me about my vacation to Aruba and to the old Gorgonzola Hotel, don't be shy, just ask. It was a nude-only hotel, so, there's a lot of bits and pieces kind of hanging out there over the weekend, but, when in Rome, when in Aruba. So anyway, thanks for tuning into the show. I'm excited to be here, so let's get into it. So I got a couple headlines for y'all. First one, I do want to preface this a little bit. So I left for about a week. I didn't broadcast last week. I took some time off to work on some projects that unfortunately I don't have any updates on right now. Right now, in terms of updates, it's kind of out of my hands. I'm waiting to hear back from somebody, from something. And once I hear back, hopefully this week, I will have an update for you. I'm very excited about this update, very excited for these new developments, and I'm excited to share it with you all. So hopefully, like I said, within this next week, maybe by Wednesday, I'm crossing my fingers. Wednesday will be the day, but if not, I guess you'll have to wait. But yeah, a lot of things happened during the week that I was gone. So picking headlines for this evening proved to be sort of challenging, just because it feels like there's so many important things kind of going on in the world, yet alone just the U.S., that felt weird to just kind of talk about a couple things. But we have a lot to cover with Bob Lazar, so I don't want to spend too much time on headlines. But the first one comes from CNBC.com. Ruth Bader Ginsburg to be first woman to lie in state at Capitol and will lie in repose at Supreme Court. The late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg will become the first woman to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol and only the second Supreme Court justice to be honored that way. Services for the justice, who died Friday at age 87, will begin Wednesday morning with a private ceremony at the Supreme Court's Great Hall for Ginsburg's colleagues, family, and close friends. She will then lie in repose at the top of the Supreme Court's front steps on Wednesday and Thursday. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died on September 18th from metastatic cancer of the pancreas. So, not great news for the Supreme Court, for people who are kind of keeping their ear to the ground and their eyes open when it comes to what's happening in this country. So not the greatest time for her to go, but she did. She held on as long as possible. So, Godspeed, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You held on as long as you could, and now here we are. So we'll see how this develops. And the second headline is from FinancialTimes.com. Citigroup puts man identified as QAnon site operator on leave. A director in Citigroup's information technology department has been placed on leave after he was identified as the operator of a prominent website dedicated to the QAnon conspiracy theory. Last week, fact-checking website Logically.ai named Jason Galinas, a New Jersey resident, as the person who ran QMap.pub, one of the most popular sites dedicated to the theory, which holds that U.S. President Donald Trump is fighting a Satan-worshipping pedophile ring that has infiltrated the U.S. government. That site has since been shut down. Logically.ai also said that Mr. Galinas earned more than $3,000 a month by operating the site, which attracted 10 million visitors a month. As outlined in our Code of Conduct, employees are required to disclose and obtain approvals for outside business activities, Citigroup said in a statement. Mr. Galinas said last week that QAnon was a patriotic movement to save the country, according to Bloomberg, which was also first to report that he had been placed on leave. He did not immediately return messages seeking comment. So big news over here at Tarantula's Dream TV. I just talked about QAnon a couple weeks ago. Had a pretty great conversation with Earsat's Ghost, a good friend of the show, and data munching spirit. I think it was kind of going to start coming down to this, where these operators of these QAnon based websites that post these Q drops were going to start kind of getting outed, whether through as they say, the white hats, benevolent hackers, or just kind of through normal investigations. I felt like these websites were picking enough steam that they were going to be investigated in some way, and QAnon was going to start getting outed. Having said that, followers of QAnon probably don't see this as a big deal. In fact, they probably believe that Mr. Galinas was just part of the QAnon circle, and was just kind of intimately connected, but not in a nefarious way, despite the fact that he was making $3,000 a month operating the site, which seems like a lot of money when it comes to these kind of things. But anyway, that was headlines for the night. So let's get into the meat of the night. So Bob Lazar, he is he's a man who's come up quite a bit, I think, in the last maybe like 5 years or so. He's kind of had a little bit of a resurgence in popularity amongst sort of in more of a pop culture kind of realm. There's a Netflix documentary about him that we'll get to on Wednesday. But if you haven't checked it out, it is worth a watch. I'll just kind of spoil it right now in regards to quality. It's a very good documentary. Whether you believe his story or not, I think it does raise enough questions about the story. It's not super pandering when it comes to kind of talking about Bob Lazar. It does sort of suppose that he is telling the truth, but it does kind of throw a few little roadblocks along the way to kind of get you thinking that potentially this isn't true. So please check out the Netflix documentary when you get the chance. But let's get into some more basics when it comes to Bob Lazar. So this is from Wikipedia.org. Bob Lazar is an American conspiracy theorist who claims to have been hired in the late 1980s to reverse engineer purported extraterrestrial technology at what he described as a secret site called S4. Lazar alleges that his subsidiary installation is located several kilometers south of the United States Air Force facility, popularly known as Area 51. Now, what I find interesting about Bob Lazar, about when regards to his description, is that I don't know if I've ever really considered Bob Lazar a conspiracy theorist, although in hindsight, the descriptor does seem to fit in a sense. Now, Lazar has made some bold claims in regards to his involvement and employment at S4 and the potential ramifications of the technology he has claimed to work on, none of which can easily be verified. Now, what I say about why I've never really considered him a conspiracy theorist, even though he does fit the definition, I think he probably considers himself and a lot of people in the ufology world, they consider Bob Lazar more of a whistleblower as opposed to a conspiracy theorist. Again, mostly because I think his experiences don't quite fit the realm of theories. He's just talking about experiences he has. He doesn't quite fit the mold of a ufologist who dives more into this great government cover-up when it comes to potentially being part of the Illuminati or the NWO or anything in that realm. So it does feel less of a conspiracy theorist. But having said that, I guess what he's talking about can be considered conspiracy, so we'll go with that. Now, throughout the years, I have grown to at times believe and trust the story of Bob Lazar. Although that trust has wavered throughout the years, his initial reticence to engage with the public after his initial claims broke, as well as the lack of cashing in that many conspiracy theorists ultimately try to do, lends a sense of credibility in my book. But the lack of almost any physical evidence puts him in a very questionable place. So I've kind of gone back and forth with Bob Lazar. Sometimes early on, I really believed in his story. I was very fascinated and interested in it, and the fact that he kind of shied away from the public sphere, the limelight. It does lend a little air of credibility. There really isn't any financial gain that he seems to have had from this. Theoretically, so that did lead some kind of credibility in my book, but there are some details later on in the story that kind of clash with that. So I've gone back and forth. And right now, I do feel like he is someone who is saying things that are potentially true, but I don't know if he necessarily experienced them himself. And we'll get into that more on Wednesday. But I do feel like parts of his story might be true. Now, only within the last 5 years has Lazar been more forthright and open to talking about his experiences, avoiding interviews and public appearances about his time at S4. So yeah, really only within the last 5-10 years, probably less than 10 years, has he really kind of came out and began to re-engage with the public and UFO fanatics, UFO believers, and whatnot. So, it is what it is. So Bob Lazar's story starts in May of 1989. Now, Lazar conducted an interview with Las Vegas investigative journalist George Knapp for KLAS, a local Las Vegas TV station. Now, during this interview, Lazar was cloaked in darkness and was referred to as Dennis to protect his identity. It was during this interview that Lazar, or Dennis, broke the story of their involvement with back engineering crashed and recovered UFO craft and revelations of a secret military base, Area 51, which at the time was still a rumored location, mostly within the UFO community, which was still, the government was still officially denying that this base even existed. So he was kind of one of the first to kind of really come out and kind of break the story about Area 51. Now, I do have part of the KLAS interview, and I pulled it actually from a more recent KLAS kind of anniversary broadcast of the story with George Knapp. I actually haven't been able to find the original broadcast of this interview, and I'm not sure if it's just not available anywhere online, or if KLAS hasn't just released it sort of in an uncut way. But I do have a part of it, so I'm going to play that little part for you now.
There's really no way I can prove it without revealing my identity and getting myself into more trouble than I have already.
Exactly what's going on up there?
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs that are out there of extraterrestrial origin, and they're basically being dismantled. Some are, well, in various stages of completion, built from other parts, and they're being test flown and basically just analyzed.
You say there's 9 saucers. How are those tests going?
As far as what?
As far as whether they're successful and that sort of thing.
Oh, well, some of them are 100% intact and operate perfectly. The other ones are being taken apart. I was involved mainly in propulsion and the power source. Basically, as far as I can remember, there are about half of them do operate. And the other half are just been torn down, basically to analyze the components to them.
Where did we get these saucers? How did they come into the hands of the government?
I haven't the slightest idea, and you have to understand the information is very compartmentalized.
So there you go. That was Bob Lazar on his very first interview on KLAS TV in Las Vegas, kind of breaking the story of his time working at S4. These kind of interviews, this kind of old footage, just doesn't really happen anymore in the UFO community, since everything is HD, 1080p, if not 4K or beyond. You just don't get these like shadowy kind of little whistleblower interviews anymore. So I find them very fascinating and I just love them. But already with this interview, he's kind of laying the groundwork for his story. Now, unfortunately, again, I haven't been able to find the full interview. I'd like to see that full interview at some point, but this is all I got, so it's still very interesting. Now, later on that year, Lazar did another interview with George Knapp, this time choosing to use his real name, and went into further detail on what exactly he worked on and what he saw at S4. Now, I do have almost that entire interview, and I'm going to play a lot of most of it, maybe potentially all of it. I'm not sure, and I might make some comments here and there because I do find this interview very fascinating. I do feel like it does kind of lay that the atmosphere for the rest of the evening. So I'm going to play most of this interview. I think it's about 10 minutes. So sit tight. If you tune out on the interview, I totally understand. But it is actually it appears to be like an HD sort of remaster of this original interview I found on a website, and so it looks very good, very crystal clear. And once I found it, I knew I had to get that through some backdoor channels. I had to screen rip it. So here you go. This is a fairly uncut second interview with Bob Lazar for KLAS TV.
Despite numerous inquiries and feelers, Dennis has remained anonymous until now. His real name is Robert Lazar, a young scientist with eclectic interests. The choice of Dennis was an inside joke. He says that's the name of his superior at Groom Lake. It wasn't a joke to Dennis.
He called right after and he said, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now?" And I said, "Well, no." And he hung up the phone.
Lazar's story is by any standards fantastic. He says he's telling it in order to protect himself. He says he was hired to work at an area called S4, which is a few miles south of Groom Lake. At S4, he says, are flying saucers, antimatter reactors, and other working examples of technology that is seemingly beyond human capabilities.
So already real quick, a lot of people kind of get the Bob Lazar story a little mixed up, even though he did talk about Area 51 and kind of sort of officially acknowledged that it existed to the public. He actually didn't work at Area 51. He worked at S4, which is about 15 miles south of Area 51. And in fact, in a different interview, he said that people who worked at Area 51 didn't have the security clearances to kind of deal with UFOs, crashed UFOs or extraterrestrials. So it kind of went against sort of the understood or the rumored stories about Area 51 that at that particular base they were doing all the experimenting, all the back engineering, when in fact according to Bob Lazar it was actually at S4.
Right, this came from somewhere else. I mean, as bizarre as that is to believe, but I mean, it's there. I saw it. I know what the current state of the art is in physics, and it can't be done.
Checking out Lazar's credentials proved to be a difficult task. He says he earned degrees in physics and electronics, but the schools we contacted say they've never heard of him. He also said he worked as a physicist at Los Alamos National Lab, where he experimented with one of the world's largest particle beam accelerators, a half-mile-long behemoth capable of generating 700 million volts. Los Alamos officials told us they had no records of a Robert Lazar ever working there. They were either mistaken or were lying. A 1982 phone book from the lab lists Lazar right there among the other scientists and technicians. A 1982 clipping from the Los Alamos newspaper profiled Lazar and his interest in jet cars. It, too, mentioned his employment at the lab as a physicist. We called Los Alamos again. An exasperated official told us he still had no records on Lazar. EG&G, which is where Lazar says he was interviewed for the job at S4, also has no records. It's as if someone has made him disappear.
Well, they're trying to make me a non-person.
Explain. You called where?
Well, the schools that I went to, the hospital that I was born at, past job, and essentially nothing comes up with my name in it.
He smiles, but out of futility, knowing the whole thing must sound ridiculous. According to Lazar, his employer was the United States Navy. He says he and other government employees would gather near EG&G, fly to Groom Lake, and then a very few people would get into a bus with blacked out or no windows and drive to S4.
When you get off the bus, what do you see?
It's a very interesting building. It's got a slope of probably about 30 degrees, which are hangar doors, and it has textured paint on it, but it looks like sand. It's made to look like the side of the mountain that it's in, whether it's to disguise it from satellite photographs or what.
He says he was never told exactly what he'd be working on, but figured it had something to do with advanced propulsion. On his first day, he was told to read a series of briefings and immediately realized how advanced the propulsion was.
The power source is an antimatter reactor. They run gravity amplifiers. There's actually two parts to the drive mechanism. It's a bizarre technology. There's no physical hookup between any of the systems in there. They use gravity as a wave, using waveguides, almost like microwaves.
It took a while, Lazar says, before he actually saw one of the flying discs. However, there were hints everywhere.
Right, they had a poster, and it looked like a commercial poster almost, like it was lithographed, and you could buy it at a Kmart or something, but they were all over the place, and it had the disc that I coined the term the sport model was lifted off the ground about 3 feet at area S4 on the dry lake there, and the caption on the bottom said "They're here," and those are just all over the place.
Later, he got to see the real thing.
When I was let in, it was the first time I saw the sport model in the hangar sitting down, and I was told they could have walked me in the front door, but they purposely wanted to walk me by it. I was told not to say anything and just keep my eyes forward and walk past the disc into the office area. And I did, and as we went by it, I just kind of stuck my hands on it just to run it alongside the thing, and that was about the smallest time. After that, I got to see it actually lift off the ground and operate.
But you also, in between that, you saw more than one.
Yeah. The hangars are all connected together, and there are large bay doors between each one. And there were 9 total that I saw, each one being different.
So yeah, there's a few more minutes on this interview, but it just amazes me that this was broadcast on a Las Vegas local news program. This was just something that if you flipped on the TV, back in the early 90s, late 80s, whatnot, I guess this would have been late 80s, this would have just been on the TV. I don't know, maybe it would have been your evening news. You're sitting down to a microwave dinner with your family, with your sweetie, and you're just watching a guy really just break down this secretive UFO kind of test center, this back engineering laboratory. You just don't get that these days. Everything, it almost feels like maybe it's because the reality is stranger than fiction, but it's still, this amazes me. I wish this was still kind of going on these days, with news, with local news, but unfortunately it's not. So let's get back to the last few minutes of this interview.
They had the assortment pack.
Security at S4 was oppressive, Lazar says, and his superiors used fear and intimidation almost as a brainwashing tool.
It did everything but physically hurt me.
Put a gun to your head?
Yeah.
And said what? Actually put a gun to your head?
Well, they did that even in the original security briefings. They had guards there with M16s, and guys slamming their finger into my chest, screaming in my ear, some people pointing weapons at me. Like I said, it's not a good place to work.
That fear factor would surface later. Lazar agreed to undergo a polygraph exam as part of this report. Polygrapher Ron Slay asked about the technology Lazar had seen.
Did you knowingly lie when you said you had actually seen anti-gravity propulsion in operation?
The results of this exam were inconclusive. Lazar appeared to be truthful on one test, deceitful on a second. Slay recommended that a second examiner be brought in. Polygrapher Terry Tavernetti runs a corporate security operation and is a former Los Angeles police officer. He put Lazar through 4 tests and concluded there was no attempt to deceive.
And I left there thinking that I feel we do have some credibility to what the subject had to say. And that's when I went to some of my colleagues.
Tavernetti sent the test results to a third polygrapher who agreed the results appeared truthful. The charts were then sent to a 4th examiner who did not agree, suggesting Lazar might be relating information he'd learned from someone else. The polygraphers conferred and decided they would not issue a final statement on truthfulness until more specific testing can be conducted, and that's where it stands. Tavernetti believes that difficulty in determining Lazar's truthfulness stems from the fear that was drilled into him.
I think we're talking about a subject here that is so far-reaching, and it is so emotional. And when you're dealing with emotions, this is polygraph, because we're dealing in polygraph, you're looking at fear. The fear of getting caught telling a lie because something bad will happen to you if you do.
Well, I am telling the truth. I've tried to prove that. What's going on up there could be the most important event in history. You're talking about contact, physical contact and proof from another system, another planet, another intelligence. That's got to be the biggest event in history, period.
And it's real.
And it's real and it's there. And I had an extremely small part in it, but I'm convinced that what I saw is absolute proof of that. There is no way we could have created those systems. There's no way we could have made the discs, the power supplies, anything to go with them.
There you go. That's pretty much the entire interview. That second KLAS interview with George Knapp. Now, it does go on a little bit further after that, but it's mostly just George Knapp kind of breaking down the end of the interview, kind of what some of his sources later on that he had interviewed regarding Bob Lazar. But that's pretty much the entire interview. So I hope you all enjoyed watching that HD crisp, clear as a bell interview with Bob Lazar back in the late 80s. Now it's 9:28. I want to get to my song of the night real quick, and then I'll get to your comments right after the break here. But my song of the night is coming from a great band that I just discovered in the last couple weeks. It's Pig Frenzy. They're from Rotterdam, Netherlands. The song's "I Don't Need You," and it's from their 2018 self-titled album. So after the song, I'll be back. It'll be open line. Phone number for the show is 520-704-7820. I'll get to your comments right after Pig Frenzy, so please enjoy some friends from the Netherlands. right. That was Pig Frenzy with their song I Don't Need You from their 2018 self-titled album. Now, if you want to throw some piggly bones towards Pig Frenzy, you can find them on Bandcamp at pigfrenzy.bandcamp.com. So I hope you all enjoyed Pig Frenzy. They kind of came into my world out of nowhere, and I'm loving me some Pig Frenzy. It is 9:32. It is open lines over here on Tarantula's Dream TV. Phone number for the show is 520-704-7820. If you'd like to call in and chat about Bob Lazar, or just ask Samba a question about my recent vacation to the old Gorgonzola Hotel in Aruba. Anyway, so let's get to some of your comments, as I haven't been paying attention to the comments tonight, just because I've been watching. I'm so enthralled with this Bob Lazar interview footage. Nicholas Cage Fight, hello there. Jazzy Boho, hello. Trial and Error Collective, hello. Trial and Error Collective, Bob Lazar's Lob Blog. Wow, that is a mouthful. It's keeping my tongue limber over here. Bob Lazar's Lob Blog. So thank you for that, Trial and Error Collective. Jazzy Boho, where do we get these saucers? Where can I buy one? I'm not sure. Maybe potentially Costco sells like a kind of an industrial size pack. I'm sure if you got a Costco membership, Jazzy Boho, maybe check out the big old warehouse of goodies. Not Sam's Club though. Costco. Las Muletas, KLAS is putting K-Gun 9 to shame. That's what I was saying. I'm like, come on, K-Gun 9. Why aren't you interviewing the local UFO experiencers, the local UFO aficionados? Let's get into it locally, on a local level. Where's the media on my doorstep? I'm doing an interview with Samba over here, doing a little a studio tour. I'd gladly take him through my studio and let them kind of see my little museum of wonders over here. So if anyone has any connects with K-Gun 9, maybe do like a little human interest piece with Samba over here in Tarantula's Dream TV. And Nicholas Cage Fight, is Lazar the only person left in his family? Now, as far as I know, I don't believe Bob Lazar has any siblings or anything, but I could be wrong about that. And it looks like we do have a caller. Caller, you on the air with Tarantula's Dream TV. Hello, who's calling?
This is Agent J.
Oh, goody gumdrops. Agent J, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing, Samba?
Oh, I'm just fine as well. Just over here in the studio talking about Bob Lazar. Are you familiar with Bob Lazar?
Bob Lazar. Yeah, I'm familiar. Hey, how was the vacay?
Thank you very much for asking, Agent J. It was great. I go every year to Aruba, and I always stay at the old Gorgonzola Hotel. They've got the best foot massages. They just put those hot coals right on your pinky toe and just let it wiggle around there for a while. So I had a great trip. So thank you very much for asking. It really warms my heart to think that, or to know that you're out there and you care for me. You care about my vacation. So thanks again for asking.
I care about those toes.
Well, I'm glad someone does. Have you been doing a lot of cruising around the old space-time continuum? What have you been doing?
I've been zipping around. I've been taking a little look here and there. I was doing a little bit of research on the Blobzar, and I was thinking it's pretty wild that they just that the government, that was the Pentagon, was like, yeah, we got some off-world vehicles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Are you referring to this the more recent news? I had talked about it a number of weeks ago on the UFO episodes with another guest. But yeah, the Pentagon sort of officially acknowledged the potentiality that we have off-world vehicles. That was the verbiage. They didn't say UFO. They didn't say UAP. They said off-world vehicles. So for people on the airwaves who didn't know, that the government sort of officially acknowledged it in a weird way, but also in a weird way they really haven't said much more than that. That seems like that would be a huge bombshell, but it really isn't in 2020. It's just another thing to throw on the heap. What do you think of these off-world vehicles, Agent J?
Well, it depends. Are you asking me from my personal experience, or are you asking me what I think of this information?
I guess a little bit of both. I mean, you're traveling around there in a time machine of some sort. I don't know if it's a physical craft or if it's just some sort of state of mind or what, but it does seem like you might have at least some sort of knowledge on interstellar travel in some way.
Well, so well, I could say from my experience, I don't know what these other jokers are using, but from my experience, you get in and you kind of go between different potentialities because it's all out there, and you just go around and then it flies.
That's it, huh? That seems pretty. I mean, it's remarkable that stuff works, but it also seems kind of strangely simple. I don't know. I guess I imagined there would be more to it than that.
Yeah, you would. But as far as what the information goes, I thought it was just very interesting that the idea that this kind of tacit acknowledgement of like, yeah, we kind of probably have some off-road vehicles. It seems really in line kind of with what the Blobmeister is talking about, because he's basically just kind of saying the same thing. It's like, I don't know where these come from, but we got them, and we're working on them.
Yeah, it is very similar to essentially what Bob Lazar said more than 20 years ago. But what's interesting with the Lazar story is that he kind of, I wouldn't say he revised his story later on down the road, which we'll get into, but he did kind of add to it. In fact, on a more recent interview on the Joe Rogan podcast, not a big fan, but occasionally has a guest or two that's more interesting than the actual host. Bob Lazar did kind of reveal some more information on where these craft potentially came from, apparently from documents he saw when he was at S4. So we will get into that later, but initially he was a little more kind of ambiguous with kind of where he thought or where his knowledge was when it comes to where we got these things. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on with the government these days. They seem like they have a lot on their minds over there in Washington, D.C. So letting us know about UFO craft. It just seems like they kind of just toss it out there.
Yeah, it's weird. It's almost like you just can't trust them.
And I'm not going to go so far as to say you can't trust them, but and in my private life, I don't really think you can trust the government. So, but it is what it is, I guess. I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but the government tends to have its own agendas when it comes to what it wants for its citizens. So it is what it is. Yeah. Well, I do want to thank you for calling, Agent J. Hope you're staying safe out there on your time travels.
Hey, thank you so much. I'll see you later.
There you go. That was resident time traveler cruising the space-time continuum, Agent J. I hadn't heard from him in a long time, so I'm very happy that they sound like they're staying safe out there in the space-time continuum. And it amazes me that they still come back to this one just to talk to old Samba over here. If I was a time traveler or being able to kind of cruise through different dimensions, I don't know if I'd ever come back to this one, because this one seems kind of like at least this year seems like a cursed dimension. So at any rate, Trial and Error Collective, yay, Agent J, we missed you. Well, there you go. Agent J, if you're still on the airwaves somewhere cruising around, you have some fans over here on Tarantula's Dream TV, so call back anytime. But like I was saying, Nicolas Cage fight, as far as I know, Lazar didn't have any siblings. Maybe I just didn't do my due diligence and research his family tree. He did have quite a few ex-wives. I feel like he had at least 2 or 3. And as far as I know, none of them have come out and sort of rebuffed Bob Lazar's claims or confirm his claims. So either way, I don't know, in regards to his family tree, if there's anyone out there in the Lazar family who can kind of corroborate or completely just demolish his case when it comes to his story. Unfortunately, and it does seem like maybe having a few ex-wives might do that too, but they haven't said anything as far as I know. I don't know. So if anyone has any connects with the Lazar family or knows any of his ex-wives, pass on my name and maybe we can get an official statement from the old Lazar family. But anyways, let's get back to some of Bob Lazar's claims. Now this is sort of a long list of his claims because he has his story. It's a long one, as you saw. The interview for KLAS was just but a taste of the Lazar story. So now, since those initial interviews, Lazar has expanded his claims through various other interviews over the decades. Now, Lazar attended, this is what he says. This is what he claims. Lazar attended and graduated from MIT, obtaining his master's in physics physics, as well as a master's degree in electronic technology from the California Institute of Technology, or Caltech. Now, why I say that this is what he claims is, as you saw in the KLAS interview, ooh, that's another mouthful, there hasn't been any real physical proof that he had attended these universities, not through contacting the colleges or even through Lazar himself. He doesn't seem to have any diplomas or records, really. So, but he does claim that he got his master's in physics and a master's degree in electronic technology from MIT and Caltech. Now, Lazar said he went on to work for Los Alamos Laboratories as a physicist, which is known officially as Los Alamos National Laboratory, described as a United States Department of Energy national laboratory initially organized during World War II for the design of nuclear weapons as part of the Manhattan Project. It is located a short distance northwest of Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the southwestern United States. Now, due to his educational background and time spent at Los Alamos, he was contracted to work at S4, located roughly 15 miles south of Area 51. So he didn't work officially at Area 51. He worked at S4, which is a big part of the story. He doesn't necessarily know exactly what went on in Area 51, but he does claim that those working at Area 51 did not have the security clearances to actually investigate UFOs. So that big raid on Area 51, you weren't going to find anything. You had to go search for, you had to go raid S4, but that didn't quite have the same social media ring to it. Now, when he arrived at S4 via bus, he noticed the location was built into the side of a mountain range with large hangar doors being covered in some sort of sand-like material to help mask their existence to the outside. So the hangar doors were very nicely camouflaged, so you couldn't really see it from the outside unless you were on the property and already kind of looking for them. Now, Lazar claims he was given a Majestic clearance, which has been rumored to be the top secret clearance, the highest clearance available, and is related to the Majestic 12, the secret organization tasked with keeping the UFO agenda under wraps. So he went above Q level clearance, which is apparently the highest security clearance that can be given under sort of more popular means. Majestic is the nitty-gritty top level of clearance, according to Bob Lazar. Now, while working at S4, Bob worked on a project to help back engineer recovered alien craft, with there being a total of 9 craft stationed at S4. Now, this is from a Medium.com article entitled "Bob Lazar, Conspiracy Theorist or Whistleblower." He claimed that these spaceships used 3 anti-gravity cylinders underneath the ship that could swivel in 180 degree or 360 degree patterns depending on the direction. These cylinders supposedly acted as gravity amplifiers. Now, we'll get into a little bit more of how this kind of gravity amplifier worked a little bit later on, so I'm going to skip forward a little bit. Now, Lazar claims to have touched the craft the first time he ever laid eyes on it, and he said, "This time that I went in, there were hangar doors open. I went in through the hangar door, and in the hangar door was the disc, the flying saucer that I worked on. I saw it sitting there, and we'd walked by it. It had a little American flag stuck on the side, and I thought, oh my god, this finally explains all the flying saucer stories. This is just an advanced fighter, and this is effing hilarious. So I went by, I slid my hand alongside it. I got reprimanded immediately for touching the thing. There was an armed guard that followed us in and said, keep your eyes forward and your hands at your side and just walk in the door." So already Lazar was getting in trouble with his employers, which would be a theme later on in his story. The crafts originated from the Zeta Reticuli star system. He said there was some paperwork that indicated that this UFO was from the Zeta Reticuli star system. How they obtained that, I haven't the slightest idea. It wasn't just from the Zeta Reticuli star system, it was what they called ZR3. It was the third planet in that star system. There was no other information about it other than what supposedly, that's where supposedly the craft comes from. Now, we got into the Zeta Reticuli star system and the Zedans, or Zetas, when we were talking about the Planet X kind of conspiracy last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago. So if you listen to that program, you're already familiar with Zeta Reticuli, but if not, Zeta Reticuli is a rumored location a rumored hub of alien activity with the Zetas living there, and they are apparently giving information to humanity. Now, when describing the inside of the craft, Lazar says it's a very ominous feeling because everything is one color. It's like a dark pewter color. There are no right angles anywhere. It's as if somebody took a model and fashioned it out of wax and then heated it just for a short time so everything melted. Everything looks like it's fused together. Everything has a radius, a curvature where the two items meet. It's a really weird looking thing. There was almost nothing other than a small foldable hatchway that looked recognizable. Everything was really unworldly. Now, some of the craft were apparently very old. Now, Lazar made this claim on a recent episode of the Joe Rogan podcast, which I actually have this clip for you right here.
Have you ever asked anyone that has any inkling of any idea of where they got them or how they got them?
No, but something must have been said to me from Barry. But it was just too long ago, and I can't quite remember what was said, but it just left a seed in my mind. I think at least one of them was part of an archaeological dig. So it's old. At least one of them is old. I don't know if it was the one I worked on, but I remember something to do with an archaeological dig.
Whoa.
So that means it's not just old, it's ancient.
That'd be a great Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
Right?
As all of it would, yeah.
That tripped me out when he said that for the first time.
Yeah, that's a freak out right there.
There you go. So that was Bob Lazar talking to Joe Rogan on his podcast in regards to apparently some of the craft were ancient craft, at least according to some documents he saw when he was working at S4. Now, before I go on, I just want to say I really don't like Joe Rogan. I feel like he does a lot of harm in the world with his podcast. So I feel bad using some of his clips because I don't really like his show at all, and I don't particularly like Joe Rogan. But he does, like I said, he does have interesting guests on his show, and the fact that he can just sit there and chat with them for 2 to 3 hours is I'm envious that he's able to do that. But I'm not a big fan of Joe Rogan, so I'm not. This isn't a kind of a thumbs up to Joe Rogan's podcast in any way. Now, during that same Joe Rogan interview, Lazar said that all the craft were physically different from each other, and I do have that clip as well, so here we go.
And when you see this craft and you're inside, was there any indication that there was an area that they would use to control it, to pilot it? Was there a pilot seat? There
were 3 seats. They sat around, the reactor was in the dead center of it, and then equidistant around there were 3 seats. And that's all. There was a large, they're not consoles, they're large rectangular objects, also spaced, equidistant around the center. There's nothing on them, there's no buttons, there's no lights, there's no controls.
Look the same color, the same
Everything
thing.
is the same color.
It's just a different shape.
Right. And directly underneath them, there's 3 levels in the craft. The main level is what we're talking about. Directly under that, those are the gravity amplifiers, the big rectangular objects. Underneath them are the gravity emitters that look like, for lack of a better word, a trash can hanging on a pipe. 3 of those. And then the top layer, this is just my personal belief, I think that has to do with a navigation or their version of a computer with some planar panels, sensor panels around the craft that we would call portholes, but they're not portholes, they're just black areas. And I think that just determines its position in space. But I physically was in the center section, and I stuck my torso in the bottom section and hung upside down so I could see how the gravity amplifiers were positioned.
What is the roughly the size of this thing?
I don't remember from being there, but after all this stuff was over, I had John Andrews, a guy from the Testers Model Corporation, and we sat down and tried to figure out from what I saw and known sizes of things, and we came up with 52 feet in diameter.
So
I
it's
think that's
fairly small.
Yeah, so I think that's a reasonable guess.
Now, you said there's 9 of them, and you got a brief.
All right, so there you go. There's a little bit more to that clip, but essentially that kind of gives you the gist of sort of his description of the craft. I have a little less than 10 minutes on the air, so I do want to kind of get into a few more of his claims that are fairly interesting as well. Now, this is from wikipedia.org. In 1989, Lazar said the seats of the saucer he saw were approximately child-sized, and that he had seen alien cadavers of a corresponding size. He also said that while walking down a hallway at S4, he briefly glanced through a door window and saw what he interpreted as 2 men in lab coats facing down and talking to something small with long arms. Now, he does go on to revise this detail a little later on in his story as the years go on, but at one point he did say that he potentially saw a very child-sized UFO, and he does claim that the sport model or the craft he worked on, the seats were very small, potentially for a creature or a humanoid extraterrestrial that was only about 3 or 4 feet tall, so very small, which actually does kind of coincide with a lot of abductee stories of being abducted by sort of they kind of call it maybe like a foot soldier type army of grays that are actually childlike, very small, while the actual kind of more imposing super slender tall grays are the ones that kind of do the actual experimentation, kind of human autopsy kind of thing. So this kind of does correspond with that. So take that for what you will. Now, apparently Lazar was hired to replace a few different scientists that unfortunately died while examining one of the craft. Now, I do have a video of him talking about him being sort of the replacement for these kind of former dead physicists.
Allegedly, obviously, I didn't see this and I don't know it to be fact, but this is what I was told, that I was hired to replace one of a couple people that were killed while working on one of the reactors from one of the crafts. Apparently, they, for whatever reason, cut open an operating reactor, and the device exploded, killing both of them. The scientists that were killed there, allegedly the detonation from the explosion was fairly large. It would have rivaled a small tactical nuke. So it was done at the Nevada test site, and it was to be passed off as an unannounced nuclear test.
There you go. That was Bob Lazar talking about him replacing some, unfortunately, some dead former physicists as they were experimenting on the craft, and kind of caused a small sort of tactical nuclear explosion, I guess, at S4, which seems unfortunate. And it seems like there would be maybe some outside stories of that happening from maybe people around the area that would have noticed a giant explosion, but I didn't seem to find anything on the internet anywhere about kind of any news reports or anyone reporting a giant sort of small nuclear type explosion, but apparently that's what happened at S4. Now, S4 apparently used a specialized hand scanning device that measured bone length to verify a person's identity and allowed them access to the site. This detail was confirmed in a later documentary, and that's the one we will get into on Wednesday. Now, the last little factoid I want to give you for tonight before we run out of time comes from a website called HiggyPop.com. Not Iggy, HiggyPop. Now, it says, during his time working at the base, Lazar would drive his friends and family out to Groom Lake, where every Wednesday night they'd bear witness to an impressive display of glowing objects. The bright lights would rise above the mountains and begin dancing around in the sky, and were seen to be pulling off maneuvers that would be impossible for any terrestrial craft to perform. At times, they would come to a sudden and complete stop and seemingly hover. Some people think that these weird lights might have been the result of an experimental proton beam produced by a particle accelerator, basically a massive real-life Ghostbusters proton pack. They think that pumping this amount of energy into the air could produce glowing balls of plasma. Some think Lazar may have even known this to be the case, but used the phenomenon to bolster his story. He claimed that these were flying saucer tests, and that the bright glow of the disc was due to the way they were energized. So he did take people out to see what he said were flying saucer test flights. He did this a good number of times, and in fact, one of these trips actually is kind of got him in a lot of trouble as he was caught kind of by like base security in question. But according to him, he was just kind of let go, but he did kind of fear for his safety after that particular incident. So that's essentially the end of the show for tonight. I only got a few more minutes, and I do want to get into a few more things, but I'm going to save them for Wednesday. On Wednesday, we're going to get into kind of some more of the more recent Bob Lazar stuff. We're going to get into Element 15, which is a substance that kind of a lot of his story hinges upon this idea of Element 15. We're going to get into Bob Lazar's story because there are some things that kind of corroborate his story with the public, and there are some things that don't corroborate his story. So we're going to get into that on Wednesday. So anyway, we will be back in a few days. Looks like I disconnected there for a second. I don't know if anyone got that, but we'll be back on Wednesday. We're going to be talking about Bob Lazar and sort of the proofs and criticisms of his story, the recent Netflix documentary that came out about Bob Lazar, and potentially Bob Lazar being sort of a puppet for some other members of the UFO community. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in to Tarantula's Dream TV. I am Samba. I'll be back on Wednesday. So please, social distance if you can, wear a mask if you go outside, and remember, it is a weird, weird world. Take care.